I'm Mark Dawson from the Self-Publishing Show, and this is Self-Publishing Spotlight, where we shine a light on the indie authors who are changing the world of publishing, one book at a time.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Spotlight. We meet indie authors at all stages of their careers and ask them a series of 5 questions. 5 questions about their process, their mistakes and their successes. 5 answers that will help you level up your own author career. My name's Tom Ashford and I'm part of the Self-Publishing Formula. Don't forget that you can get your self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. This week's guest is Tim Heath. He's written 15 books in the thriller genre and he lives in Estonia. Welcome, Tim.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. Do you want to start by talking about the 15 books that you've written?
So I've lived outside the UK for 12 years. So I think as part of that journey, I came into writing and definitely a flavour of my books is the world I find myself in. So it's so different to my upbringing, which was living in Kent and the UK. So some of my books, about I think nine of them are based in Russia, where we lived first. My last one was purely Estonian based, which was probably my bravest book for me, being here in Estonia with lots of locals, getting their history right. But yeah, so it's kind of crime thrillers, that kind of genre.
Nice. And you mentioned before we went live that you've got 4 more books in the works.
Yes, 4 more books. So I've the next 3 will finish a 9-book series, and then actually I wrote one during the first week of lockdown, which will I guess be a standalone number 19.
Nice. Okay, well, question number 1 is, why do you write? So is there a particular reason that you started writing in the first place?
Yeah, I think there's 3 things I would say. So 1, the stories. I feel from the very first genuine moment of inspiration of a story, title, everything dropping in, I knew I had to tell it, and I think that's continued with all my stories. So I want to tell the stories. The stories need to be told. I think I touched on a little bit a moment ago. I write because the world I find myself in. So it is so different to how I grew up, and not everybody does get to visit Russia or live in Russia or Estonia. Maybe people don't even know where Estonia is. We're just south of Finland, northern Europe. So I think writing stories that reflect and give a little bit of taste of life outside of your native land is an angle. I'm gifted to do this, and actually, it's something I should keep pursuing. So that's why I write.
Yeah, fantastic. And in terms of your publishing history, are you entirely self-published, or have you got a traditional publisher, or are you hybrid?
Yeah, so I'm entirely self-published. I did go. I think when my first one. So when we moved to Russia in 2008, I was writing or picked up writing what became my debut novel. That was written over many years. And so at the time, I think indie was fairly new, KDP was fairly new, and so I was going to go that route of get an agent. Has to be a New York-based agent. So I was following this particular guy's blog and stuff. So he was, so I submitted to him. He was in New York and did as he claimed he always did. He reads it and then responds immediately because he's got too many. So I went through that process a little bit. Got your learnt the standard thanks but no thanks, and actually it was something this New York guy said. He did a typical week, which was like he had 400 submissions, of which he asked I think 3 full manuscripts. So he only asked for the first chapter, I think, and a covering letter. So I just did the numbers. There's massive factors in that. If you're that busy, depending on how many good ones he's seen that week, what day he's reading it on, how busy he is. So there's, you kind of realize it's not an exact science. It's not that these 3 out of the 400 were the best. So yeah, so I've went that route, but then obviously discovered a bit more about KDP and launched into it back in when we moved to Estonia. So the first book was published nearly 8 years ago.
Wow, great. Well, in terms of the thriller, was there a particular reason that you wanted to write thrillers as opposed to, it's very different, but romance or sci-fi or whatever like?
Yeah, definitely an interesting. So the films and books I love are that genre particularly. I mean, I'm married, so I do have to go into other genres to watch. But yeah, I think it's definitely writing what you feel most comfortable with for me.
Yeah.
And obviously it happens that thrillers are one of the big markets anyway. So, but that's convenient. But yeah, for me, I wouldn't want to write to market purely, thinking that way. It has to be, the inspiration and writing out. So, but it fits that. It's a competitive but good genre. So it's all.
Great. Well, question number 2 is, how do you write? So are you more of a plotter, or do you just see where the story takes you?
Yeah, no, definitely a plotter. I think a little story I use is like my transformation from being a pantser, as to use your phrase, and becoming an author was like, it's like going on a car journey. And pantsers, you kind of set out, and it's quite fun, and but at some point you get lost because you don't really know where you're going. And I think my transformation, which happened with my baby novel, was going, suddenly plotting it and understanding it. Suddenly I now had a route map. So, I'm setting off, and I know the stop-off points, and I know the destination. So I think, that's definitely been the transformation for me, to plan and then to write. So, that's what I do now.
Yeah. And is there a particular software you use, like Scrivener, to sort of to map it out?
Yeah, so practically I use write on Scrivener on my iMac. So both lovely to use. I then it's written onto Scrivener. I read through and edit into Pro Writing Aid. So kind of I always do the first read through, but I kind of do that on the computer now. I used to print it out, but there's no point now. So Pro Writing Aid, and kind of do the edit live on Pro Writing Aid, and copy it chapter by chapter into Vellum, and then that's ready for the editor. So kind of those are my main pieces of software to get it to that stage.
Nice. And is there a particular time and place that you prefer writing?
Yeah, so I stand up. I stand up to write. I have done for about 4 years now. I'm unusual in the sense I don't often hear people say this. So I don't, like, for me, I write in sessions. So, for example, at the end, I mentioned it earlier, the most recent book I've written, the end of March, I had a few days. So I kind of set myself the challenge in the first week of quarantine here in Estonia. Could I write a book by the end of March? Ended up finishing it on the 1st of April, but that was in 8 days. And that came about by planning it. So I looked back Thursday and the Friday, 19th and 20th of March, I went out, planned it. So this is literally, I had a general idea, but this is me planning and thinking through, like, character names and all that in those days. And then Monday, the 23rd, started writing, and then, followed it through 8 days. I don't write on the weekend, so finished it on the Wednesday, the 1st. And so, and then I haven't written anything since, and I probably won't until, the autumn, who knows? So, but I'm still going to release 4 books this year. So and when I write all day. So, it's given myself permission to say, this is what I'm doing. So I'm at the computer, 8 a.m., 7:30, depending, have a good lunch, have a rest. I always nap, and then back in the afternoon. So, get about 6-7 hours a day. So try and hit about 10 to 11,000 words, and then get a first draft down, which is very rough, but that's my process for, so writing seasons, plan it well, write, and then kind of move on to other stuff.
Yeah, wow. Well, that sort of that leads into and sort of answers question number 3, which is: are you a full-time author? If you are, how did you get there? And if you aren't, what steps are you taking to make it happen?
So I'm a full-time author. Though I guess that's currently purely opportunity rather than financial. So I'm in a position where I don't need to rely on my income. But I'm kind of a bit stuck. So I would just explain a very brief story. So in Estonia, so I just by reaching out to them, often, maybe the cheek of a foreigner, I got into, when I only had 2 books a few years ago, I got into the biggest bookstore chain here just by kind of approaching them, reaching out, and they took on, a small order of both books. And then when it came to my third book, which actually ended up on Amazon becoming my first bestseller, they wanted, so I think that, they wanted me to pay them to advertise their book in store for them to sell it, which, kind of doing the maths, the little bit that I was getting from them, they wanted me to kind of use to help them sell it, which is their job. So I kind of thought, this is a little bit weird. I'm not kind of doing that. And I think my challenges, so March last year, obviously been part of SPF as a student for many years. I kind of applied myself full time to going in marketing. So, as my time is available, instead of writing, I said, okay, I'm gonna go full time. Became an international bestseller by throwing money at ads and everything. So, got there in the thriller chart. But I think my kind of mindset now, and I actually stopped advertising in April last year, is I kind of realized Amazon is now doing what the bookstore was doing. So the money that we're making, they're basically asking us to advertise with, and they're kind of selling. So I'm a bit stuck because, so I had that great month, basically broke even, and then looked at the numbers of how much, Amazon and Facebook earn, which was in the thousands. And I kind of I'm a bit in a just working it through what it means going forward. But there is something new on the horizon, but that's something separate. So we'll see what turns out with that. But I do write full time, but I market when I can.
Yeah, fair enough. So question number 4 is, what mistakes do you think you've made and what have you got right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like many people, I put my first book out too soon. This is not the first time people have answered with that. So obviously I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and compare it to now is kind of embarrassing to think about, but it definitely went out too soon. And also I was a little bit too reliant on my designer. Now, I think design is one of those difficult things that, you can't necessarily do if you're an author, and obviously you shouldn't do necessarily. BookBrush coming along. So I was at the SPF live day in March. I got out the UK just before, or got back to Estonia just before they closed the border up here, and met the guys from BookBrush. So that's actually allowed me to take back control for my design process.
Right.
I've worked with my designer for all 15 covers, so I've kind of understood, and I always steered him, but then he did all the technical stuff, and now BookBrush has allowed me to kind of take that back. So I think that was one thing that I felt a little bit like crippled with, or paralyzed with, in a sense of the design stuff. I'm in his hands, and actually recently, I wasn't getting stuff back very quickly. So that was kind of, so BookBrush has been a breath of fresh air for me for that. There's covers I'm putting out and actually having fun with it.
Yeah.
What have I got right? I think first one I would say is characters, and this I have no idea how. So people always talk about the depth and uniqueness, etc. And they I don't have a process for this characterization. It seems to just come out. So I don't like plot it. I don't think that, I think on my original book I followed some guides where you put in there who their parents are or their relationship, even though it never comes up in the book, just so you understand the character. That's obviously a long-winded way. I don't do that, but it's often, there's one thing people comment on, it's the characters, which is, so I don't know how that happens. Second thing is plots. I know why this is, so they talk about them being deep and twisty and consistent. So that's fun. I like things that are multi-leveled. I never write a simple book. And also recently, and this came out of a comment, and I guess it's a good piece of advice for indies. So I last summer I was at a English Teachers of Estonia conference in another part of Estonia, and I was allowed to have a little stall. The idea was I'll get invited into schools, which didn't really happen. But so they had one guest from a publisher in the UK who was doing a seminar, I think. And so she came over, very polite, but looked at my book, most recent one, and like a lot of guys in SPF, it's professionally designed, it looks good, and she picked it up and just looked at the spine and said, "Oh, you're independent. You're an indie author because you haven't got a logo here." And it was just it's a tiny thing like that. So
Right.
I've now put that. So put a logo. Obviously I have my own publishing house. So got a logo design for that. So that's now on my spines and on the back of the book. A little tweak, but I think just something that it's just another. We're not. It's helping people that might otherwise think, it's different to other books, just to kind of help. So yeah, I would advise put logo on your spine. It's very easy to do, certainly with BookRush, or get your designer to do it. And that's something I feel like I've got right. It's great looking at my books now with the logos on and everything. So yeah, I feel almost there.
Yeah, well, optics are important. Well, question number 5 is, what's your final piece of advice for authors starting out in indie publishing?
Yeah, so indie publishing. So this is my advice would be, because even if people don't say it, sometimes I see authors acting like this, like they think indie means independent, but they kind of act like it means individual. Right. So my advice is, it's not individual, so you don't have to do it all on your own. That's, so don't self-edit and don't self-cover design. Even yesterday I was on Instagram and there was someone, they had loads of followers, and the covers were just atrocious. And you're kind of thinking, but obviously, independent. So, it means independent. So it's different from the old school bricks and mortar publishers, but it's not an individual. So do get outside editorial help, someone that isn't you. Do get a cover design help until you've been in the business long enough to understand covers.
Yeah.
Because I think poor editing and poor covers are probably the two biggest flaws that I see. And really, for many of us, we can look at a row of books and you can kind of tell, from some of them that it's substandard just by a little glance, maybe. So it's things like that. Yeah. So independent or indie doesn't mean individual. That's my final piece of advice.
Nice. Well, those are your 5 questions up, Tim. So thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for this week's Self-Publishing Spotlight. Don't forget that you can get your free self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. And if you want to appear as a guest on this show, send us brief details about yourself and your writing at selfpublishingformula.com/spotlight-guest. I'm Tom Ashford, and I'll see you again next week.